In today's video, I'm gonna be looking at an article that I found in Harvard's magazine. The name of this article is Beyond Belief, and it looks into the connection of what they are calling quote-unquote spiritual practice, belief, and biomedicine. Now, I want to preface that whenever I make this sort of videos, people think that I'm talking about religion, and while religion is related to how these studies have begun, this is not about religion. What I'm going to be talking about in this article is mentalism, what seems to be at the root of why this quote-unquote spiritual practice works. As the article goes on, it talks about how different spiritual practices are reaching the same goal, which makes it so, and concludes that it is not a specific spiritual practice, but something else. And I talked about this in the past a lot. I've done a lot of videos on the placebo effect and the fact that as of today, there is no conclusion of what exactly is the placebo effect. I'm going to be linking below all of the videos that I've made on the placebo effect. Some of the research is very, very interesting. But in today's video, I'm going to be looking at this article where a lot of there's not going to be a specific study, but all throughout the article, a bunch of studies are mentioned, which people can just go on Google and look at it themselves. Now, I want to repeat, this is not about woo, this is not about nonsense, this is not about magic, this is Harvard's magazine. And this is the idea of people in the medical fields looking deeply into this phenomenon that still remains unexplained. In this channel, I talk about altered states of consciousness, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, psychedelics, where people are getting from these experiences what seems to be happening, the afterlife, so on and so forth. And one of the things that repeats in these reports and in these stories, in this research, is the message that people keep getting from these quote-unquote entities, or some people call them angels, some people call them aliens, so on and so forth. It seems to be this non-human intelligence. And one of the things that repeat is that we can control our reality with our minds, with our thoughts. The concept that thoughts precede reality is the first principle of one of the first laws in the Kybalion, in ancient scriptures, in ancient philosophies, is that the all is mental, is the principle of mentalism, is the idea that mind precedes matter. Just what a lot of people in the research of quantum physics are linking this idea that consciousness is related to matter or to the particles, so to the building blocks of reality. And people deny this. A lot of scientists think this is nonsense, and people are ridiculed for believing this, but a lot of scientists are starting to speak out, and there's all these heaps of research on it coming from all these different what I like to call the umbrella of the research of consciousness. And now, looking deeply into medical research into the placebo effect only confirms what many have been suspecting for a long time. We might just have evidence of mentalism in action. Before I move forward, I would like to remind you that if you want to join the growing discussion on consciousness and would like to be notified on the latest scientific discoveries and theories surrounding this topic and how they connect to ancient mythologies and philosophies, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I'll try to upload at least one video per week as I continue with the outline. Alright, so as mentioned in today's video, I'm going to be looking into this article published in Harvard Medicine, in the Harvard magazine. The name is Beyond Belief. Research is sounding the depths of the connections between spiritual practice and biomedicine. Now, the idea of calling it Beyond Belief is because the article goes into the idea that there's something else going here. It's not about people's prayers. I've talked about this before, and it seems that every time I upload a video about the placebo effect and about mentalism, about these things, and whether prayer affects healing in some way. People think I'm talking about religion, but I am not talking about religion. I want to make that really, really clearly. I'm going beyond religion. So I found this article from Harvard. There's a lot of different research papers mentioned in this article. So one thing that you can do, I'm going to link this article below. You can go through it and look at all of this research. These are published articles, but I've spoken about all of these things before. So I'm going to be linking the videos attached to them. And if you just want to go through the actual research, go into the video. And always, on ongoing research in this playlist of the outline, you're going to find all of the videos have a research paper attached to them. This one is not going to include them because all of these things I've talked about before. And if you're interested in the actual research, you are one Google search away from just looking into this research. 155 patients. It was a Journal of Affective Disorders. So all of the journals, all of the publishing is written in the article. You can go through it. Alright, so the article is about, and it starts talking about David Rosmarin, who is a Jew, and he is in psychology, in the field of psychology, talks about how 2000 study in professional psychology research and practice found that psychologists are 5 times more likely to be atheists than non-psychologists. So there's not, the conversation was not on the table in 2007. Now, I don't know when this article was actually written. It's a shame there's no date of publication like some of the other articles on Harvard Magazine. But the research papers that are linked here come 2010, 2011, 2006, so on and so forth. This is roughly the research mentioned is roughly 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's fairly new, and a lot of people are still not understanding this, are still not putting this into their minds, are still not thinking about the implications of this research, and this is something that we have to start changing. Especially when we're coming out of a worldwide pandemic and there are lingering effects and debates on vaccines and debates on different things and so on and so forth. I'm probably gonna mute that word because I don't want my videos to get flagged. There's a lot of discussions about treatments and so on and so forth. We have tons of research about this, and people need to internalize what all of this research, actual sound research, means for their lives and even beyond. It says, Rosmarin and a few colleagues developed a spiritual and cognitive behavior therapy group at one of McLean's days programs. So the idea is that this was an Orthodox Jew, and he was a psychologist, and he realized there's not a lot of research going on because of this, because everybody is an atheist. So he started to go into the connections between spiritual practice and health. One concept he had been pondering was whether a person's religious beliefs might affect treatment outcomes. Okay, so it goes into the first research here. He recruited 159 patients and assessed their belief in God, quote-unquote God, using as I said, when we say God, and when I'm talking about God, when I specify about God, I'm talking about the God of Spinoza. The God outside of religion. It could be. Now this one is, I don't know if this is about the Jewish God. I don't know if this is about the Christian God. Think of it as the God of Spinoza, as the God of Einstein. I made a video about this, Einstein's God. I'm gonna link it somewhere on the screen. We're talking about, as Einstein put it, supernatural intelligence and higher spirit, something beyond our conception of the quote-unquote religious God. Findings surprised Rosmarin. Not only was belief in God strongly correlated with positive treatment outcomes, the stronger the belief, the better the recovery, but the intensity of the belief in God also paralleled the degree of hope placed in therapeutic interventions. So it's not about their belief in God, it's about their belief in general, in things, in the intervention, in the medicine. There is another way the findings reported in the October 2012 online issue of the Journal of Affective Disorders. So if you want to look into it, it's right here. It's all right here. This is not something made up. This is not a random blog. This is the Harvard Magazine. And everything is right here. I've talked about it before. I'm going to be linking things below in the description of this video. So nearly all the atheists in the study felt their treatments would fail. So you're talking about the mental effects. You're talking about a mental attitude towards the disease and perhaps towards different things in the life. Do you think the mental aspects affect your life, or do you think they don't? We have evidence showing what's going on. This is what I'm talking about in this video. Think about the implications that science is proving that mentalism is real. The article goes on to talk about some of the other previous ideas on this that people had, and some of the research before from the 1900s, 1836, 1847, so on and so forth. Patients' personal beliefs and their physical health remains peripheral to most medical training. Many notable figures in the school's history have taken the subject seriously. So all of this here, mind, cure movement, emotions, result of physiological conditions, relationship between emotion and the nervous system. You can find a lot of literature on this right now. And the main idea that when people go to the doctor today, they are told that everything is because of stress. What is stress actually? So there's a lot of information about it. I talked about this before. During the 1960s, Benson was toying with a theory that graded on the sensibilities of his fellow cardiologists, namely that emotional states could affect blood pressure. At the time, high blood pressure levels were widely considered to be the exclusive byproduct of kidney disease. The very idea that there could be a mental component to high blood pressure was heretical, Benson recalls. So now I've gone into this. I talked about this, the scientific dogma. It was heretic to think that there's a mental component to high blood pressure, and today it's still heretic to think about these things, to talk about these things. The idea of mentalism being confirmed by the medical research, which is exactly what is happening right now, but we call it the conclusion from all of this research on placebo is that we do not have an answer. That's the conclusion. We don't know what's at the root of it. This is the very idea that there could be a mental component to high blood pressure was heretical. But now what the research is suggesting is that there is a mental component to everything, to absolutely everything, and this is the principle of mentalism. Benson enrolled volunteers who practice transcendental meditation and monitor their brain activity. Brain activity is important. Breathing, blood pressure, and metabolism during meditation. He found that the meditative state decreased metabolism, blood pressure, and breathing rates, and altered brain waves. Now, the reason that I found this article is because I was doing some research on brainwaves. On my previous video, one of my previous, 2 videos ago, I was talking about psychedelic research and the research from Christopher Timmerman, which points towards the idea that when the actual breakthrough experience from psychedelics, which is when people see God and they say that they are in the presence of God, or they are in the presence of aliens who are telling them the truth about the universe, and they realize everything and they realize they are everything, or these transcendental, heavy, emotional states, what's actually happening in their brain when all of this is happening is that they are going through the delta brainwave, a combination of delta and beta. These are the slowest brainwaves, which means that there's no activity in the brain. There's little activity in the brain. People, it is called that it's a dreamless state of deep sleep. Now, this dreamless, I'm gonna go into it in the future, is not quite accurate. One thing is that you do not dream, and another thing is that you do not remember, as it is the case in many of these altered states of consciousness or psychedelic experiences. People don't remember the whole thing, and it quickly fades, just like when you wake up and you think about that vivid dream and then you forget everything about it. It doesn't seem to be registered in regular memory. It seems to be somewhere else. So the idea here is that when people go into these altered states of consciousness, is that they are leaving behind their brain. They are exiting. They are in the slowest mode, the less activity in the brain, they are going somewhere else. This is the main idea here, and this is going with the whole idea of meditation and healing, and we're talking here about mentalism when we have evidence of all of this right now. I'm gonna be talking. I'm gonna be talking about this in the future, about how exactly there's people think that consciousness is created in the brain. It seems that we have evidence. Finally, we have evidence to what many believe, what many are starting to conclude out from the research, which is that consciousness is not created in the brain, and there might be existence consciousness outside the brain, outside the body, which means that there might be life after death. Alright, so the article moves forward to schooling the idea of meditation, so on and so forth. In fact, a 2008 study in PLOS 1 reported by Benson, Tower Lieberman, an HMS Associate Professor of Medicine and Director of the Genomics Center at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and colleagues found that the relaxation response can possibly affect the expression of genes related to immunology, inflammation, and aging. This was, according to the researchers, the first comprehensive study to show a connection between meditation and gene expression. Now, I've talked about this before. I made a video about this very thing. I think it was a different study, but I think it was a little bit more of a recent study. But this is what the research is showing, that these meditation states, these what people are calling quote-unquote mindfulness and so on and so forth, actually has a different expression of the genes. It has to do with telomere length and aging and overall health, and all of this is done through meditation. And what seems to happen, as I said, what seems to happen in meditation is that people go into a different brainwave state, which means that there is less activity in the brain. They go somewhere. When they actually do correct meditation, they are somewhere else, which is the same thing that happens when people are going through deep sleep. So every night, the body seems to be healing in a way, or seems to be doing all of this procedure, but it can be done in different ways. And being conscious about it, about the ritual of it, which the article goes on a little bit in the film. I talked about this. I've talked about ritual. I talked about what all seems to be pointing about. I'm gonna link the videos below if I find them. When people are conscious about this, it's even improved. The effects are improved, and this is research. You can go to all of this research. I've talked about this before. Now, the idea of this article is what goes next. Despite the veneer of Eastern spirituality often associated with meditation, there is nothing especially religious about Benson's approach. They just tell people to sit down, to breathe, and so on and so forth. There's different ways, different types of meditation. It has nothing to do with the Buddha. It has nothing to do with Om. Maybe it is a good tool for ritualism to say Om and just meditate. But also, patients who identify with a particular religion, however, are offered the choice of using a word: Hail Mary, full of grace, Shema Yisrael, and Inshallah. All of these are the different practices, different ideas, the different religions, and it has no effect over it. It's not that my God is better than you, God, and so on and so forth. We're talking about beyond religion. We're not talking about any of the gods of religion. We're talking about the God of Spinoza. We're talking about what seems to be the actual thing that is happening in the universe, in life. We're talking about mentalism. Alright, so the article continues and ends up talking about what we're really talking about here, which is the placebo effect. Placebo sets the bar for determining a real drug's efficacy. That's how medicine is researching placebo, just to check if the drug's efficacy is real. They put it against a placebo, and if the efficacy of the drug is below the placebo, then the efficacy is not enough. It has to be stronger than placebo. But the fact is that the placebo is still working, and then the drug makers and the whole medical research try to figure out if the placebo was a thing or not. So whether or not the drug was actually efficient, the placebo was still working, and drug makers and the people in the medical field started wondering, well, why is it working? What's happening here? Why are if people believe that they're taking a drug, it's actually helping them? What's going on here? And this is something we still don't know. There's a lot of theories, a lot of research in it, and we still don't know. I made a video about this, why placebos are getting more effective. Drug makers are desperate to know why, and this is more important. This is the answer to what this other article is going to talk about. So let's go into it. Personal beliefs, whether they're religious or not, give solace during sickness, but does that translate into improved clinical outcomes, improved symptomatology? I think the evidence is just not there, he says. We're talking about Ted Kapchuk, which is of the same professor of medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and he's carefully studying the placebo effect. So he's a little bit skeptic here. He's saying that it's not about belief. He doesn't believe it's about religiosity, and I agree with him. There's something else going on here. Because so to say, for someone like Kapchuk, a researcher who time and again has demonstrated the powerful effects placebos can have on those who take them, such a statement might seem incongruous, but for Kapchuk, equating placebo with belief is far too simplistic. A small 2010 study of this showed that placebos work even when patients are told that the pill they are taking contains no active compound in the common understanding of the placebo effect. Such results simply don't make sense. We don't understand the placebo effect because we are wedded to our current cognitive framework. He goes on to talk about the ritual, the exams ritual, the tone of the voice of the person who leans forward towards the patient, looks at the physician who looks a patient in the eye. I talked about this even in the Native American rituals. What is ritual? What is the purpose of ritual? The purpose of ritual is to make the person believe. Is it the rabbit's foot that is going to save you from something, or is going to give you that good luck? Or is it the belief that the rabbit's foot is going to have something? And if you lose your rabbit's foot, then the worst things happen to you because you believe that the power comes from that. I made a video a long time ago about this, and talking about ritualism and the purpose of ritualism, which I'm going to link it somewhere on the screen if I find it. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a study demonstrating, you can go through all of these studies, go look for them, that the environmental cues of positive placebo effect can be activated non-consciously, totally outside the awareness of the patient. Now, this is something really interesting, which is to say that why, if some other people are praying or believing that the patient is going to be better, then the patient is better. Without the patient even knowing it. This is where it starts to get really weird and really strange, and it goes with the theories that everything is connected. Everything is one. Everything is mental. In 2011, Kapchuk published a review article in the Philosophical Transactions titled "Placebo Studies and Ritual Theory: A Comparative Analysis of Navajo Acupuncture and Biomedical Healing." In it, he argues that the placebo effect is the combination of the healing ritual. He's putting so much emphasis on the ritual, the offer, acceptance, and ingestion of a pill, even an inactive one. Participation in the medical and healing process probably influences the activity of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin. I've talked about this a lot, on how the ritual is to make the people believe in it. Even the act of taking a pill, even in the ancient tribal dance from the Native American tribes, all of it is part of it. The hoods and the candle and the dagger on the table, all of it is ritualism. The theatric, all of it is ritualism. Now, as I said, things start to get really complicated here. So, the participation in this healing process influences, probably, the word is probably, influences the activity of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin. And the same thing is what some of the other doctors are saying, which is, okay, so when you relax, the stress levels goes down, and then inflammation goes down, and that's the placebo effect. There's nothing magical about it. It's nonsense. But how do you explain the nocebo effect then? And as I said, this is in 2011. In this video, I talked all about this and some modern research. I'm gonna link it somewhere on the screen, or if I done it already, everything is gonna be below in the description of this video. I think that video is actually quite important, but this is just putting emphasis into it. How do you explain that when people think that something is going to make them sterile, that's going to happen? How do you explain very specific things that happen to people? And we're not talking about reducing inflammation. We're talking about very specific things that happen to people. How do you explain some of the other research where people who are being prayed for without them knowing, out of nowhere they are healed? Now, going on with this idea, the previous idea, where totally outside the awareness of the patient, and if there is something outside, if there is some sort of connection, there's actual research by Dean Radin where he analyzed in the space, in the ambience of quote unquote healings, that the molecules of water change, they are modified, and he even did some other experiments dealing with quantum readings and so on and so forth. I'm gonna link it somewhere on the screen. All of these, you have tons of research on this, and we're starting to look into what's happening. So is it because it influences the activity of neurotransmitters? Is it because it reduces inflammation? This does not explain the nocebo effect. This does not explain very particular things that have been proved by the placebo effect, and I talk about them in that video that I made before. Okay, this line of thought might explain the perplexing results of a 2006 study in which Benson and colleagues observed the effects that intercessory prayers said by strangers had on cardiac bypass patients. This is intercessory prayers. I've talked about this before somewhere, I can't remember. We know it is when people think that I'm talking about religion. I'm talking about religion. I'm talking about something beyond. I'm talking about mentalism and whether mind is connected from some other people, and these quote-unquote prayers have any effect into this. So what this specific research showed was a nocebo effect, which makes the thing even more complicated. So the patients were divided into 3 groups, one whose members were not prayed for but did not know it, one whose members were prayed for but did not know it, and one whose members knew they were being prayed for. Participants in the first and second groups fared no differently during the recovery process. So even if they were prayed for, if one group where nothing happened to them, no prayer, they didn't know anything, nothing happened. The other one, they were prayed for but they didn't know it, and the other one, they were prayed for and they did know that they were being prayed for. And the third group, this last one, the one that people knew they were being prayed for and they were being quote unquote prayed for, they had a higher incidence of complications. Instead of healing, they had complications. Why? What do you explain? Is it about the prayer? Is it about asking God? Or is it perhaps about the mental process that either people who are praying or people who know they are being prayed for had in the effects? Perhaps these people, they didn't think that they were worth of being healed by God, or they didn't even believe in God, and they thought, oh, I'm not gonna get better because I don't believe in God, even though I'm being prayed for, or I don't deserve the prayers, so there's complications. So this is a nocebo effect that probably they were creating themselves. So what happens is that the researchers don't know what to do with the evidence. It may be worth noting that the third group of patients received prayers minus the ritual. So this person, this Ted Kapchuk, is thinking about, oh, it's a ritual. It's ritual that is happening. Is perhaps making the patient no, making the patient believe or not. This is the difference between it. What's really happening here? There are so many questions we need to answer concerning belief and psychiatry, Rosemary. It's a basic question, basic information that we just don't have. This is the conclusion of the article. We just don't know what's going on here. But as I said in this other video, I go into the work of Fabrizio Benedetti, and one thing from his research which is really interesting is that the ability to think about the future, the human ability to think about the future, is key in the placebo effect. Talking about mentalism, we're talking about the mental process of thinking about a future. And they were able to prove this with some people who had some mental disorders, or they have something happened to the brain where they could not really make a process about the future. I think it had to do with Alzheimer patients, something like that. And the placebo effect was less efficient in them than in others. So what are we concluding here? Is it that God didn't want to heal them, and they were, the prayer failed? Is it because they didn't believe that they were worthy of the prayer? Is prayer in a God, does it matter at all? Or is it the belief of the people that is creating all of this? And there's tons of research about this. What we're talking here is about mentalism being proved over and over, that there's consequences to people believing in things, whether it's a prayer, whether it's a Native American ritual, whether it's whatever, it's taking a pill, the ritual of the eye contact from the physician to the person, whatever it is the person believing that they are gonna be healed. And you find all of this in ancient scriptures, as I said, and all of the healings from quote-unquote Jesus, the figure of Jesus. He asks them, do you believe that I can do this? And then they are healed. In every single reported healing, he asks this question. We go into quantum physics, the conscious role of the observer. It's when people look at things, is when the particles manifest. And people, the scientists are saying, no, consciousness has nothing to do with this. It cannot be. It just cannot be. And they become dissonant about it. But all of the research is pointing towards the idea that we are talking about mentalism. Mind over matter, all is mind. If you go into all of this is ancient scriptures. People knew this long time ago. The number one principle of Hermetic philosophy in the Kybalion is mentalism. All is mind, the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, which are interchangeable according to Einstein. And all that is apparent to our material senses is spirit, which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite, living mind, a universal organism. Integrating this idea into our lives, into our research, the very conception of it, the very possibility of it, absolutely would explain everything. We're talking about consciousness, we're talking about mentalism, we're talking about this connectedness that people are experiencing through altered state of consciousness, through near-death experiences, through out-of-body experiences, through psychedelics. We're talking about what the ancient scriptures were talking about, and not even like a specific religion, like the perennial idea of ancient scripture, talking about the same thing: Atman, Brahman, the Kybalion, mentalism, the kingdom of God, quote-unquote, within and all around. We're talking about the same thing. This repeats in UFO literature, in all of the research of consciousness, and now we have evidence of it in medical research, but people are so dissonant about it. They are not ready to understand it. They are not ready to confirm it. And the conclusion is simply we have no conclusion. And this is a good conclusion because it remains, it keeps us looking for it. It keeps us on the research. However, understanding the implications that this could have, not only in the medical fields, but even beyond, into our understanding of the world and reality, could change the way that we interact as human beings, could change the way that we lead our societies. This is information that needs to be known. This is information that needs to be integrated, as it is starting to be integrated in the medical fields, in Harvard medicine. We're talking about spiritual practice in Harvard medicine publications. This is what needs to be happening. And the sooner we start integrating the possibility that the world is mental, the sooner we're gonna start moving on with the research on consciousness. If you're on the path of finding the truth about reality and our purpose as humans on Earth, the information that I have to share concerns you. After a lifetime of research in philosophies ranging from Buddhism to the occult, I've encountered themes and patterns along some baffling information that is beginning to be seriously studied by science. A Rational Divine Outline, The Ghost of Jesus, is the first iteration of this project, where I analyze the message of Jesus without dogmatism, fanaticism, or religious bias. You can find my work available on Amazon on the link below. If you find this work valuable, consider subscribing, sharing, and following me on social media, as it'll help others in the same path to find this information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.